Today we're here to talk about the most disappointing books I read in 2024. How is that different than the worst books I read in 2024? Well, these books I had the highest expectations for, whether, from myself or from other people hyping them up, and these are the ones that did not deliver. They might not have been the worst things I read all year, but these honestly probably gutted me more. First up, we have The Hour of the Witch by Chris Bohjalian. So my book club and I wanted to read a story of a kick-ass female with some witchiness, fighting against the patriarchy. This is not it. We probably should have guessed that just because it's written by a man, and not to say that men can't write women, but it's just harder to pull off. This book was just so clunky and so common. You spent the first half of it feeling like you were gonna work up to some climax, only for it to really peter out. Relationships in this book are so spare. I didn't believe in her friendships, I didn't believe in her marriage, and I certainly did not believe in her love interest. The plot was just super lackluster. I was bored, so was my reading group, and this is one of those books that the epilogue just felt like so unnecessary. I love a good villain story. Tell me how they got to be the way they are. And so I purposely finished up the last of my reading year in 2023 rereading The Hunger Games so I could read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. She had such good fodder to work off of. I mean, she created it herself. This is Cornelius Snow. It should be super interesting to read about his childhood and how he got to be the way he was. First of all, this is so drastically overwritten. I was bored to tears during parts of this book because I was just get to the point. This is also another relationship romance I just don't believe in. I don't believe that him and Lucy were in love. And her portrayal was so annoying. She is just this manic dream pixie girl. Not only were the relationships unbelievable in this, but I wanted more of what Panem was at the very beginning. This also just, in terms of writing, was a huge downgrade from the trilogy. So this is going to go up on my shelf away from The Hunger Games, and we're just going to kind of pretend like it doesn't exist. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say my book club was cursed this year because we read almost exclusively bad books. The only one we read that we really enjoyed was The Glass Castle. Unfortunately, The Marrow Thieves by Sherry DeMaline falls under the bad books. This is one of those books where the premise just made me salivate. I wanted to read this so bad because the premise is there's this plague of a sleeping sickness that is causing white people to just kind of become zombies, and the only cure is the marrow from the bones of Native Americans. And so you're setting up this horrible plight that they face, and yet this book couldn't have written itself out of a paper bag. It had no idea how to work with timeline. It had no idea how to work on building up the world. I hardly remember anything about the characters. Everyone felt so minutely sketched. This honestly felt like a dream the author had, and she couldn't really remember any of the details upon waking, but tried to write it anyway. The book that put me in my only reading slump this year, and that is The Bridge of Clay by Markus Zusak. I stopped reading for 3 days after this book. I also stopped kind of in the middle of it because I was just like, what is this? I love The Book Thief. It was one of my favorite books I've ever read, and so I was hungrily ready to dive into more of his works, and this is nothing like that. First of all, this claims to be a YA book. It is not. Second of all, I don't know what else it claims to be because there was really no cohesive plot. I honestly really wasn't sure why I was supposed to care about the four brothers. The only parts of this book that I cared about was actually the story of their parents and how they got together. The author put all of his energy into writing about that relationship because that felt investable, but I didn't get any of that when it came to the brothers or the romantic story. I also totally was not invested in the fact that this book is mostly about racing horses. It's just not an interest of mine. We have another book with a great premise and honestly, great writing. It just wasn't carried out till the end, and that's The Plot Against America by Philip Roth. He clearly is a talented author. I am not debating that. What I don't understand is how this possibly could have been on the New York Times Best 100 of the 21st century list. The long and short of it is this is an alternative universe where instead of FDR winning the presidentship, Lindbergh wins instead, a Nazi sympathizer, and so America becomes allies with the Nazi party during World War II. Fascinating, right? And I was fascinated. Through the first 3/4 of this book, I was hooked. Yes, it was slow moving, but it felt like it was building up to this ultimate crescendo. When I tell you everything was resolved in a quick 20 pages through news bulletins rather than the child narrator who's talked us through most of this book, I was so depressed. He just slapped this neat little bow on it and said, just kidding, everything's perfectly fine, and then moved on with his life, and I was left wanting. All right, I think I'm getting into territory where people could be upset with me. Next up, we have The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. What did you people get out of this book? I was told this was going to be lyrical. This is the most basic of basic writing. I was told this relationship was going to crush my soul. I I didn't get anything in their relationship. I just did not feel any emotional resonance in this book, and I thought something was maybe wrong with me, but my book club felt the same way. So only time I felt an inkling of emotional resonance was when they were being taught by Chiron, and that is in the first like 100 pages of this book. The rest of it, I was just like, what am I doing here? Do I even really want to read Circe? I do, but is it worth it? And I'm really disappointed to talk about this next one. I had such high hopes on this. And that is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. How is this a classic that you guys still adore? This is so ultimately like old-fashioned, anti-feminist. Like, please stop talking about it in the same lines as Jane Eyre. When I tell you I did not like any of the sisters in this book, I am not exaggerating. Like, Jo is fine, but I also found her completely pretentious. The rest, oh my god, so problematic. Don't even get me started with Meg and John's relationship. That is so toxic to the extreme. And the way their mother deals with it, putting all the blame back on Meg. Then Amy, oh my god, I was just so annoyed with her the whole time, and I can't believe her and Laurie got together. I spent so much of this book just being completely enraged. It took me the better of a month to finish it. This next book disappointed me because this author was also my top 5 favorite books, and that is Upright Women Wanted by Sarah Gailey. First off, I do want to apologize about misgendering them. They go by they, them, and not she, her, like I used in my favorites video. Sarah Gailey's writing in The Echo Wife was so beautiful, so poised, like the perfect balance of being poetic but also just moving the plot along. And this had absolutely none of it. It felt like Sarah whipped this up on a weekend and just said, oh yeah, that's good enough. Not only was the writing completely mediocre, but the execution of this was completely bungled. These are lesbian renegade librarians in a dystopia where books are illegal, and they're secretly handing out books to everyone. There is so much fodder. It hurt me so much that this was just fluff. I'm ready to throw hands on this one because I really don't understand how this became such a darling. And that is Babel by R.F. Kuang. Guys, this writing was like hitting me over the head with a sledgehammer. I felt like R.F. Kuang was talking down to me as if I was the dumbest person on earth because she had to reiterate everything at least 5 times and with the most blunt language. Did I think the points she wanted to make in this book were good? Yes, absolutely. Did I feel like she force-fed me every single one of them? Yes. This is an author just telling you what to think rather than making a case for it and letting the audience come to their own conclusion. This was writing that felt amateur at best, and the only saving grace in this book is how cool the magic system was. I just wanted the same feeling I got from The Secret History in this, the conniving, the backstabbing, the aura, the relationships, and this did not deliver. And my last is a bone to pick, because I watch book talk after book talk of people saying this is their favorite book of all time, and I honestly would not have picked this up myself because it's not in a genre I like to read. And that is Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. Guys, this guy is a huge misogynist. There's not a single female character in this book who has any sort of agency, who has any sort of personality. They are just known by their physical attributes and how they relate to the male characters in this book. The obvious critique is Furman. Like, he just treats women as if they're objects, and there are so many quotes in this that just pissed me off. But you know what? Daniel is just as bad. The way he idolizes Clara and puts her up on a pedestal and yet demands all of this from her when she owes him nothing just made me so sick I could not appreciate this book at all.